Hello, we're going to cover Chapter 12 for Human Resource Management 2115. Today, we'll be looking at the organizational reward system, which is something that's typically pretty important to all employees. Here are our learning objectives. So, because of its impact and how it's interpreted by employees, the organization's reward system is one of the most effective motivation tools managers have at their disposal. The responsibility of coordinating and administering the system usually resides within the HR division or with the HR manager. The organizational reward system is concerned with the selection of the types of rewards to be used by the organization. It includes intrinsic and extrinsic rewards. Intrinsic rewards, we know, are internal rewards to the individual and are typically derived from involvement in activities or tasks, whereas extrinsic rewards are controlled and distributed directly by the organization and are usually of a tangible nature. Here are some examples of intrinsic and extrinsic rewards. Selection of the rewards to be offered is critical if the reward system is to function effectively. This means that management must recognize what employees perceive as meaningful rewards. Pay, I don't care what you say, is usually at the top of the list. However, rewards should be viewed in the larger perspective as anything employees value. So for me at Bank of America, that just wasn't my pay. Those were the trips that I took, the gifts that I won. It also included recognition nights and recognition just throughout the organization. This could also include office location, such as an office with a window or a corner office, the allocation of certain pieces of equipment, the assignment of preferred work tasks, and informal recognition. What management perceives as a meaningful reward and employees' desire may or may not be the same thing. Research does indicate that many good employees quit their job due to the lack of recognition. So that's important to know. Sometimes it's not always about pay or compensation. Variables such as age, sex, marital status, number of dependents, and years of service also influence employee preferences for certain reward. Older employees value different things than younger employees, and people from different countries also have different preferences. It's also important to know that external factors do place limitation on what an organization can reward. So it does have an impact on its reward system. And this can be limited by the organization size, environmental conditions, stages in the product life cycle, and the labor market. While it's desirable because of the benefits of how it motivates employees to perform better, relating rewards to performance can be difficult. Unfortunately, many formal rewards provided by organizations are not related to performance, but determined by the organization membership and seniority, such as paid vacations, insurance plans, and paid holidays. We think of those as things that we should have as opposed to rewards for performance. The organization variable most used to reward employees is, of course, pay. I want you to be sure to read the HRM or Human Resource Management in Action on page 246. I think that is a great story um, of how Lincoln Electric has successfully linked pay to performance. Job satisfaction is an employee's general attitude toward their job. The organization's reward system often has a significant impact on the level of employee job satisfaction. In a 2012 study of job satisfaction by the Society for Human Resource Management, opportunities use opportunities to use skills/abilities was cited as the most important factor in job satisfaction by 63% of the respondents. Job security came in second, and pay was a close third. Surprisingly, job satisfaction is not synonymous with morale. They're two different things. Morale is defined as an employee's feelings of being accepted by and belonging to a group of employees through common goals, confidence in the desirability of those goals, and desire to progress toward those goals. Morale is the byproduct of a group, whereas job satisfaction is more of an individual state of mind. Factors that contribute to job satisfaction include opportunities, as I mentioned, to use your skills and abilities, job security, compensation, but also communication between employees and senior management, as well as the relationship with the immediate supervisor. It would be very interesting to hear you all's thoughts on the satisfaction performance controversy. In a nutshell, are employees happy because they do a good job? Or do they need to be unhappy? Or do they need to be happy in order to do a good job? Be sure to read the illustration on page 247. Did you know that compensation and pay do not necessarily mean the same thing? Compensation refers to all the extrinsic reward that an employee receives in exchange for their work. So for me, as I mentioned earlier in the recording, it wasn't just the pay, it was the trips, it were the gifts and those type of things. Pay refers to only the actual dollars employees receive in exchange for their work. When we refer to the base wage or salary, we're then talking about the hourly, weekly, or monthly pay that employees receive. Incentives, those are going to be those additional funds to the base wage or salary. These are typically directly related to performance. And then benefits, these are rewards that employees typically receive as a result of their employment and position with the organization. For added clarification, here are some of the items that fall within those categories. Successful compensation policies must include minimum and maximum levels of pay, general relationship among levels of pay, and division of the total compensation dollar. Additionally, organizations need to determine how much money will go into pay increases for the next year, who will recommend a pay raise, and how pay raises will be determined. Historically, many organizations have had a policy of not disclosing pay-related information. Its justification hinges upon its ability to avoid discontent that results from employees knowing what somebody else is earning, as well as employees feel that their pay is no one's concern but theirs. People become very private and very sensitive when it comes to their pay. And while these are great justification, or while this is great justification and rationale for pay secrecy, the disadvantages include not eliminating, is that it doesn't eliminate pay comparisons, but actually may lead to feelings of dissatisfaction. And terribly so, it perpetuates the income gap between men and women. So, and here are some of the drawbacks of pay secrecy. It's difficult for employees to determine whether the pay is related to their performance. Um, Employees start overestimating pay of their peers and their supervisors, leads to feeling of dissatisfactions, and employees can become suspicious. So here is an alternative: pay transparency. Because of the drawbacks to pay secrecy, it's in the best interest of the organization to adopt this policy. And it's done to overcome these drawbacks of pay secrecy. For those managers who struggle with the idea and the need to avoid total pay transparency, organizations can disclose the pay ranges for various jobs within the organization. And this will help to communicate rank. This will help organizations to be open about pay and maybe overcome those feelings of dissatisfaction. Now we'll move into some of the government legislation that helps with pay. The Davis-Bacon Act was passed by Congress in 1931. It requires that contractors and subcontractors on federal construction contracts in excess of $2,000 pay prevailing wage rates for locality of project. That prevailing wage rate is to be determined by the Secretary of Labor. It additionally requires overtime of time and a half be paid for more than 30 hours per week. Passed in 1936, the Walsh-Healy Public Contract Act requires organizations having business in excess of $10,000 to the federal government pay at least the minimum wage as determined by the Secretary of Labor. Additionally, the Defense Authorization Act of 1986 changed the requirement to overtime for hours worked over 40 in a week. The Fair Labor Standards Act requires that individuals employed in interstate commerce or in organizations producing goods for interstate commerce are to be paid a certain minimum wage and time and a half for hours over 40 worked in 1 week. Additionally, it places restrictions on the employment of individuals between the ages of 14 and 18. You may remember the Equal Pay Act from Chapter 2. It eliminated pay differentials based solely on sex. It does not, however, prohibit payment of wage differentials based on seniority systems, merit systems that measure earnings by quantity and quality of productions, as well as systems based on any factor other than sex. The federal wage garnishment law limits the amount of an employee's disposable earnings that can be garnished in 1 week. It protects the employee from discharge because of garnishment, so an employee or employer cannot fire you because your check is being garnished. And garnishment is a legal procedure by which an employer is empowered to withhold wages for payment of an employee's debt to a creditor. Passed in 2009, the statute of limitations on pay discrimination claims begins whenever discriminatory pay decision or pay price is adopted, an individual becomes subject to discriminatory decision or pay, or their paycheck or other benefit is issued. Prior to this act, an employee had a very narrow window, somewhere between 180 and 300 days, depending on the state, within which to bring a lawsuit against his or her employer for unfair pay or discriminatory pay practices. The act is named after Lilly Ledbetter, a former supervisor at Alabama, take that away from Atlanta, Tire and Rubber Company. She sued Goodyear after discovering that she'd been paid less than her male colleagues for almost 19 years. And that is it for Chapter 12. Be sure to get your homework and quiz in, and I look forward to seeing you in class. Have a good one.